Welcome back. Today we're focusing on a development affecting taxpayers across Namibia. NamRA's latest updates regarding the 2026 tax return process and the extension of filing deadlines. To help us unpack what this means in practical terms, we're joined by Steven Yarukeekuro Ndorokaze, Chief Strategic Communications and Support Engagement at NamRA. Ndorokaze, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, good evening, Nina, and thank you for having me.
Briefly walk us through this latest announcement we saw coming through regarding the tax returns for 2026 and what has changed for taxpayers.
Yes, no, thank you very much for the opportunity. And maybe as a way of introduction, let's start with that. It does not relate to the 2026 tax year in any way. And this is why. During the course of last year, there was an amendment that was made with regards to Section 21 of the Income Tax Act. That's Act 24 of 1981. Now, what the new amendment provides for is that when somebody has an assessed loss, previously they would be able to carry it over a number of years. But the new amendment limits that so that it cannot be carried over, especially if it's in excess or more than $1 million Namibia dollars. So what it means is that becomes a liability in respect of the tax year concerned, and it cannot be carried over to the next year. Now, those that fall within that needs to provide returns in respect of Section 21 are then required to file those particular returns. Now, there are returns that would have fallen due as from July last year, that's July 2025. And at that point, we did indicate that our system was not ready to be able for them to upload those required returns. And therefore, we extended that deadline to September. As we approached the end of September, we also saw that we're actually also still not ready in terms of our system functionalities. And then we gave that extension up to the end of March, which is tomorrow. Now, as we are approaching the end of March, we are also then making the point to say the system is still not ready to accommodate that. And as a result, we are giving an extension up to the end of October. So it does not relate to anybody else. It does not relate to individual taxpayers in any way, but it relates to that category of taxpayers who are affected by Section 21 of the Income Tax Act.
Well, individual taxpayers, including many that I know, are quite excited about this, but thank you for bringing clarity to that. You mentioned, of course, that there have been, system-related challenges with ITAS. Can you give us the current status of the platform and what improvements are being made?
Yes, and it's essentially what is contained in the public notice that we have issued. That is to say, we are still not ready to enable taxpayers who are affected and needs to comply with the provisions of Section 21 of the Income Tax Act for them to be able to upload those returns. In respect of any other taxpayers, your individual taxpayers, your income earners, the system is fully operational, and we must indicate that for the past few days, past few months, it has actually been up and consistently up, which is something that gives us greatly relief. And therefore, anybody who has a return that is due but is not related to Section 21, we urge them to file those returns because, as you might know, the tax year had just ended last month, being at the end of February. We are now rolling into a new tax year, and as customary, especially for individual taxpayers, there is that grace period between now up to the end of June. And our message has always been to say when there is an opportunity, we would want to encourage them to file much earlier rather than waiting for the queues of the last week of June. And that remains the message that we're also sending out to employers first to say where the required documentation are in place, because right now what employers do is that they load these things on a monthly basis electronically. And as soon as that closes at the end of February, if there are employers that have their tax returns, their Pay5 for their employees ready, we would urge them to please give those to the employees so that they can also file on their part as well, as much as the employers would have already populated the details in relation to their employees on the system.
With this extended deadline, Mr. Ndorokaze, for this special group of taxpayers, what do they need to be, careful about and ensuring that they remain compliant and, avoiding last-minute complications?
This particular class or category of taxpayers, the one that relates to Section 21, there is really nothing that they need to do, because what we are recognizing is that as from July last year up to when the new extension now ends, they would obviously not be compliant, because for one to be compliant, there are a few elements. One is to ensure that you file your returns on time. Two, you pay on time, that your declaration are truthful and accurate. And we now know, and that you are registered as a taxpayer being the fourth element and the first element in any case. We now know that the fact that they are not compliant is not owing to anything that they have done. It's because the system is not, as we speak now, ready to allow them to upload their documents. So there is really nothing that they need to do, nothing that they need to worry about. But as and when it is good for them to file that, we would also issue similar public notices that the period is now. And maybe one would ask, what becomes of the penalties? And then obviously it follows that, because it's not a fault on their part. One would then, it follows that they would not need to carry any extra liabilities as it relates to the time at which they then file this return. But in any case, even if the system would have generated interest and penalties and so on, you know that we are still going through the tax amnesty period, which ends at the end of October. So should have anything accrued, again, it could still be waived as part of the tax amnesty that we are going through in terms of their penalties and interest. So there's really no additional liabilities that is likely to accrue to taxpayers who otherwise would have filed had it not been for the want of our system.
What penalties will then still apply if somebody fails to, file by the new deadline?
Yes, as it is now, they will not be able to file. Maybe let's start there. As it is now, those that otherwise would have filed in respect of Section 21, the system will not allow them to file in terms of the various schedules that they need to complete. They will not be able to do so. So what happens, because they have not done so, like I say, if there were supposed to be any penalties or interest that would have accrued, it will not accrue now because it's not owing to their own doing. And in any case, had the system even showed that they are non-compliant and therefore their interest and penalties, because we are still going through the tax amnesty phase, all of those would still be waived at the end, at the period where now the system is ready for them to file.
Finally, your key message to taxpayers as they're preparing for this extended filing period?
And again, I want to make it very clear that this extended period only relates to people who are affected by Section 21. The rest of us that are not affected by Section 21, we must continue to honor our tax obligation. And like I indicated earlier on, the tax year for 2026 had ended in February, being the last month. And we really want to urge on taxpayers who are ready with their documents to already file that. And the convenience that comes with the system that we're using is that you can actually file from anywhere you find yourself. But I still know that there is still that tradition and culture where people still want to show up at our service points and ensure that they physically submit those or are assisted by our people to file those electronically. We encourage them to do that, but our message would have been the earlier the better, so that you are not subjected to what we have now become accustomed to, those long queues of the last week of June.
On that note, what support channels are available, for taxpayers who still need assistance with filing or navigating the system?
At every of our service points, and that's across the country, when you get there, our colleagues will be able to assist you, because what we do is that people do not submit physical documents. Even when you come with documents, the colleagues will register you as an e-filer and then would upload your documents so that they are filed electronically. But we still know that there are people who still walk in with physical documents, and those are assisted at every point where you find our offices, and our offices are across the country. But for those that are convenient and are comfortable with filing online, they can do so via the ITAS portal and then file their documents from wherever they find themselves. Should they struggle with anything, our call center is always available so that they can call and then be assisted there. That number is 081-9594-000. That's 081-9594-000, and you can call us during office hours and you'll be able to be assisted. So assistance is almost on all the platforms that we use. You could be able to be assisted should you struggle at any point.
Well, Mr. Ndorokaze, thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily Roundup. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to engage your viewers.
Well, there you have it. If you were confused, I hope it's making sense to you. This deadline extension for filing your taxes is not for income tax payers. You still need to make sure that you submit by the end of June. And if you need any clarity, further information, please do contact the NamRA offices directly. We'll be right back. Stay with us.